Welcome to the After Work Hangout, the podcast where you'll hear why and how everyday people shifted their careers to meet their personal needs. I'm your host, Crystal Lee. As a career coach of over 10 years, I love to engage in real talk about work and life. In Season 1, we'll chat honestly about work and money. You might be surprised by the underlying factors that have led to different career and financial decisions. So listen, get inspired, and make the moves that are right for you. Welcome, Sholeh. So happy to have you on the After Work Hangout. And I would love to just introduce you quickly to our audience. Sholeh Atash is currently a business analyst at a post-secondary institution. But prior to that, she had worked a long time in the tech sector, both in technical and operational roles. I know Sholeh as just someone who's so generous with her knowledge, always happy to support others on their career journeys, and has helped me as well. And I'm so happy to have you share your wisdom and knowledge publicly on this podcast today and hopefully help others out. Welcome, Sholeh.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Crystal. You're always kind. You're always so generous, and I'm always humbled by hearing what you share about me.
Likewise. You're always one of my biggest cheerleaders. Today, we're going to chat about negotiating for what you're worth, because I know you've had to do a lot of that throughout your career, and you've done that both in transitions between companies and more recently transitioning industry as well. So maybe what we can do is kind of jump backwards a little bit and just hear more about how did you get started in your career? Like, what type of jobs did you do and what did it mean with those job titles?
Oh, sure. My career, it's been very interesting because all I knew when I was a teenager was that I want to be in the computer world. I didn't know if hardware or software, but I was like, this is what I want to do. I was passionate about technology, and I realized that with software, you can create things. And that was fascinating. I was like, cool, meets both desires of my right side of brain and the left side of brain. So I wasn't sure, but when I was graduating, one of my background is software. I went to software. One of my instructors actually in the very last term of university hired me as a web developer. That's how I started, and I thought this is where I'm going to be. I'm going to be a programmer. But entering into an agency who had a marketing arm and an operations side and a finance side, I kind of realized that, there are more opportunities and it doesn't matter, it was like software, but anywhere else as well. So I started pretty technical. I was a web developer, then I moved to a company and I was doing data processing. I was dealing with data a lot of times, but I didn't leave tech in general. I wanted to stay in tech, and I didn't know how to navigate it when I started. But I was always curious. I was like, what if I ask this? What if I want to do this? And I was always staying up to date with what was happening in the industry. So it was technical till I got into Vancouver Film School, where I was coming back from being in another part of the world, getting married, coming back to Vancouver. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I went to Vancouver Film School in operations. And that's where I met two of my best mentors of my life.
Wow.
I still am connected with those two people. They've always been people who have given me consultation when I'm stuck and I'm like, what do I do now? So one of them was a woman and the other one was a man. And I'm sharing this because tech world is a very male dominated industry, but the female figure, she was a symbol of excellence. And while I was trying to understand what is my next move, I made her my role model. And I said, I want to be her when I grow up.
Wait, did you say that to her? Or no, or you just said that to yourself?
No, I didn't tell her. I was very young and I was afraid, and I was like, and she was the head of the department that I was working for. She was very well known in the industry. She was the one who told me that I will need people if I want to grow in the tech industry in Vancouver or anywhere else. That's what she told me, and that's what she taught me. So I met them. They really, both of them, they shaped my career, because I realized that I don't have to stay technical. They recognized something in me that I didn't know existed. With the technology background, they recognized the operations and leadership features or talent that I had, and they shaped me into the operation side. And from there, my journey kind of took a turn, because I was introduced to the tech startup world. And that's where I started going up the ladder to chief operating officer and experience what I have experienced in the past decade of my life.
Wow. Thank you for recapping all of that. I didn't know some of this, and I've known for you for a few years. But just recapping what you shared, I heard there were key people that you crossed paths with, whether it was your professor who offered you that first opportunity. And I'm sure you really shone in class, which is what made you stand out to get that opportunity. But, being a student, you're taught technical stuff, right? It's course-based work. It's not until you enter a company will you realize how a business runs and all the people involved. And you don't realize that until you start working. Yeah. So it sounds like you explored and learned and were really curious through that process. And when you had some life transitions, sounds like you got married and you came back to Vancouver, kind of made a conscious decision to try something new. And just so happens you found two people that really inspired you. Now, I want to deepen this conversation, because so often, there's advice like, go find mentors. But were you out looking for a mentor, or was it just it just happened? And then did you have specific conversations to turn them into mentoring type conversations? How did you do it? What's your advice for others?
Sure. You're right. You kind of hear that from different people nowadays. I wasn't specifically looking for mentors. I didn't know that I needed a mentor. It just happened, and I was so inspired by who they were in their roles, and I was open and vulnerable, because I looked at the dean of the department. She was this amazing woman. She was known by most of the tech agencies, marketing agencies in town. Her name pulled a lot of people in North America, because she was American. So she was bringing the Silicon Valley audience along with whoever was in the tech sector in Vancouver. So at first, I was so afraid to talk to her. I didn't know, I was like, I'm nobody. I'm just in the operations of this department. And then I observed and listened to her. And I think that observation and the fact that whatever she said, I tried, and then I went back to ask questions, created that relationship with her. And the other mentor that I mentioned, he was one of the most amazing instructors of the department, and he was coming from Microsoft. So they were best friends, and through her, I got to know him. And later on, he became my boss, because she left and he became the head of the department. And the relationship that we built together was amazing. But to answer your question, I wasn't looking for a mentor. I didn't know I should have a mentor. That relationship started, and the first couple of months, I was just asking questions. After a while, I noticed that when I go and ask questions, she stops everything. She sits down and she tells me, let's have a plan. Let's talk about step 1, 2, 3. And that's how it started.
And these questions, I just want to jump in and clarify. These aren't everyday questions like, where do I send this email to? But these are like deeper questions, right? Because I feel like we want to clarify this for anyone who is wondering. These are like thoughtful questions about, is it about your career, about the industry? What type of questions would get that response from someone to actually want to help? It's not
I totally get it. No, it wasn't about like the file or the email although we talked about those things, but because I was so fascinated by who she was and how well she was coming from the same industry, from a very male-dominated, but I noticed the way that she delivered her speech, the way she interacted with people was very unique. And somehow when she entered the room, everyone would quiet down and listen to her. That was fascinating. So that was what I went after, and I said, I want to know how you do this. And I realized you might not have time, but I wanna learn. Where do I start? That was how the conversation started. And mind you, English is my second language. I was very uncomfortable. Although I learned English from the age of 5, when you immigrate to an English-speaking country, you kind of notice that the English that you learn is a little bit different. The slangs, the way, the culture, the things that are very unique to Canadian language and culture were very different. So I was very hesitant, and when I was asking questions, I was so scared. I was like, what if she tells me that I'm stupid? I can't talk. But I think this part of my personality, I should thank my father for it, because I remember from the very early age, he told me 2 things. What you do it for you, and do it in the best way possible. Be excellent at it. Even if it's taking the trash out. And I'm using that as a specific example because that's what exactly he told me. And it made me think, what do you mean? Like, I'm just taking the trash out. How could I be excellent at it? But then when I grew up, I kind of realized that he was just using that simple example to tell me, you need to do this for yourself. And if you excel at it, you will harvest what you've done earlier. Mm-hmm. And the other thing was, there's no stupid question. What is the worst thing that could happen? Just ask.
When it comes to questions, this is what I've noticed, and just now at this point in my career, sometimes working with folks who are more junior, is if you come to me with the same question, then I find that a little bit problematic. But what I heard you say is you would implement feedback, and then you would go back with like new insights or like a deeper question or a different angle. So I think that is one of the defining factors between how to really nurture those relationships where the other person will feel like you're in it and just as much invested. Because if they're sharing their time to answer your questions, like, you take it to heart.
Of course. I think you pointed out a key factor that I think anyone who's working with a mentor or wants to go work with a mentor needs to keep that in mind. You're right. If you go to someone with the same question, it means that you're not listening. When I ask a question, even right now, when I ask a question, I write down, and when I'm writing down the answers that I've been given or the solutions that are being discussed, I try to write it as I'm hearing it. And then I look at it to make sure that I got all the details that I want. If I don't understand it, I stop that person and I ask questions to clarify what I understood, because I will go away with what I understood. I think about it, I break it down, and I'm a very visual person, so I scribble and I make a plan to understand, is this what we discussed?
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, if I'm stuck somewhere, that's where I create a new question, and I'm like, oh, I need to go back and ask this question.
Yeah.
Because if you don't create that conversation, growth won't happen.
For sure. And like that time you have with someone is so precious. So
Exactly.
you really want to make the most out of it by like asking those clarifying questions in the moment. And if you do get stuck, like when you go back, you should share what you tried, right? To show that you gave it some effort before you're just going back with another question.
Of course, that is very true. You're very right. If you want to work with a mentor, you have to be in it with your whole heart, because you're right. The time of that person is precious. At the same time, your time is precious too. You're in it to grow. So if you just want to listen and waste your time, there's no point. But if you're going to be a mentee, your number one job is to listen and do. Even a lot of times, and I want to share this because a lot of times I was told something where I was like, this is just impossible, but I'm just going to try it. And I did. And something amazing happened.
Oh.
So try it. If your mentor is telling you, mind you, it needs to be the right mentor. Because I've heard that from a lot of people who I've mentored throughout my career, and they come back and say, oh, I did this, but they told me this. Finding the right mentor is very important. If you want leadership skills, but you're going to someone whose entire life has been in a technical role, you're talking to the wrong person. You have to find the right mentor. So it's very important to understand who to go to as a mentor and understand their journey, their experience, what they achieved in life.
So interesting. Because that means you have to know what you want before you can find that mentor. But for some folks, if they're not quite sure yet, how could they have that conversation?
Yes and no. A lot of times, yes, if you're at the very early stages of your career, yes, you don't know what you want to do. So that's what I did. I didn't know. But I found that person who I was fascinated with, and I was like, this is it. When I'm in my 40s, I want to be her.
Okay. So it's like noticing where you're naturally drawn to. And as a career coach, I often encourage folks, like, I ask, like, what's the news that you follow anyway, or social media accounts, or like articles that you can just spend hours lost in reading and learning about. And like, I think noticing those glimmers of where you feel lit up and people do inspire you, you don't have to know the details, but you can at least start noticing those things.
Exactly. You don't have to know the details, but you have to have a general idea. And that will help. That will unfold, like the path will unfold itself. Stay curious, have a general goal, and go on the path.
So you did go on that path. You said that you entered the startup community and you kind of worked your way up. And it happened quite quickly, I think, because you were so focused and so curious. And if I understand correctly, it happened like both within company and both like in switching companies. So is it okay if we talk about how you navigated those transitions and being a woman in that industry, how you negotiated for your worth?
Of course.
What do you have to share there?
You're right. When I entered the tech startup world, I didn't know what to expect. Startup world is very unique. It's very fast. It's chaotic. But I love that chaotic environment because I'm a very focused person. When I want to do something, I'm focused. So in the middle of that chaos, I was very focused. So I entered the industry as an operations manager. I had a little bit of a finance background, but when I entered that world, again, I met this amazing founder. He actually recognized something in me it wasn't like I was going after a job. As I said, I was in Vancouver Film School. I was talking to a lot of different industries. My boss at that time and mentor was connected to this startup and a startup world. And it was at a time where Vancouver was like a lot of Silicon Valley companies and investors were coming to Vancouver because it was much cheaper for them to establish operations here. It still is, but Vancouver was booming. So there were a lot of startup companies around and it was growing. Again, I knew I wanted to stay related to my background, so software, but I wasn't sure what's going to happen. I didn't have any idea of what to expect, what to do, where to go. I got introduced to a group of founders. One of them was a speaker at the events that we had. I formed a relationship with him. Again, not because I was targeting their company. I was just curious. I had conversations, and then I met another founder and the conversation started like that. And they said, we know you do a lot of great project management works. We need someone. That's exactly how it started. We need someone who organizes us because we're so busy with a lot of technical things that are happening, with the growth, with things that are outward, but we don't know how to organize the inside and operations of the company. And I still wasn't sure. I was like, what does that mean? What is the job title? What is happening? And the conversation started like that. I went to their office. I met how they operate, what was the product, what was happening. And I fell in love because, again, it was chaotic. There was no path in front of me, but I knew I wanted to be part of that world. So there was no title at the beginning, and the conversation started. It went on for a couple of months, and I started there. I became the finance and operations manager. And
so there was no application. It was a conversation that evolved over a while.
The application was the last part because when the conversation started, that position was not available. They didn't even know what they wanted. They just wanted someone who they could trust was introduced to them to come and help them grow the company. Mm-hmm. And through those conversations, it took a couple of months, and then the position opened and they said, apply.
Okay, got it. So this is what I think people say, and I'm a huge advocate for developing and nurturing relationships. They're not one-off conversations, but how do you stay in touch with someone, have them know what your skills are, what you're up to, but you be curious about their needs and their problems, because when the timing is right,
yeah,
that's where the magic happens. You're there.
Absolutely. I didn't know the power of networking at that time, but that was a huge aha moment for me. When it happened, I was like, so if I didn't know them, if I didn't have that conversation a couple of months ago, this would have not happened. And mind you, I was competing with other people. It wasn't only me. It wasn't like the job wasn't handed over to me, but they knew me. The relationship was formed. And then when the position became available, I knew there were 3 other people who were interviewing. But at the end, I think, again, through the interview was very informal, but the CEO of that company asked me something, and I still don't remember the question, but I remember what he told me. And he asked me something, and my answer was like, I think it's like an Advil. Because when you take an Advil, the root of the pain is not going away. You're just cutting down the nerves that is sending the like pain pulse to the brain. And I'm not a doctor, so so when I told him that, I think it made him understand that I know what the job requires. It's like, I'm not supposed to give people a temporary position. I'm supposed to go deep down, understand the root cause of these issues, the chaos, and fix that.
Yeah. And I would say that because you spent several months learning about their company and their challenges, you were able to craft such an insightful answer during the interview. So that's another benefit of doing the networking and company research ahead of time.
Of course. When I started, I didn't know what should I ask for in terms of compensation. I had no idea, but I knew that I wanted to get paid more than what I was getting paid before. And it was a considerable jump, but I was not sure what my life or career looked like in a year from now. I was in there to enjoy the ride, learn from the tech industry, from the startup world. And it took me 6 months to understand what the future would look like and what is my worth. I kind of got exposed to who's doing what are the different departments, where the money comes from, where it goes, how it's allocated. I started talking to other people at my level, got exposed to their benefits, to their salary, and then I went back to my boss. And I remember I was very nervous. It was the first time I was asking for a raise and telling my boss in a very male-dominated industry. And mind you, I was used to it because when I was a student and started in my instructor's company, there were 2 girls. And it was a small agency. There were like 15 of us.
Yeah.
There were only 2 girls.
Yeah. So that's been your norm of your career.
Yeah. But when I was younger, I didn't know. I was very true to my personality and stayed curious, but it was difficult to have these kind of questions. Again, through mentorship, I realized how I should ask for a raise. How you don't just go to your boss and say, my worth is this, I want this much. No. First of all, you show, and that's what I always share with a lot of people that I talk to. You show who you are in the first 3 to 6 months of your new job to set the ground up and show your talents, because at the beginning of your career, a lot of people don't know who you are, what you do, what are your capabilities. Although you've had conversations and you agree on a specific salary, they still don't know who you are. They know you from a piece of paper and a couple of conversations that you've had with them. But in the first 3 to 6 months of your job, it's when you can showcase your talent and show them who you are, what your capabilities are. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've always done in any industry that I've been in, any job that I've been. A lot of times I haven't been happy with my starting salary, but I was pretty sure that within the first 6 months, I would be able to go back and ask for a raise. Because I was...
So interesting. Because I often hear people say, oh, the best way to get a boost is to like change companies. And there's a lot of critique, on social media or whatnot about the younger generations. They just job hop because they just want to go for the next big thing. But you're actually sharing, like, put all that aside, and at the end of the day, you're hired for a job, so do that job well.
Exactly.
and then go from there.
Yeah, exactly. Because the culture of work has significantly changed in the past 10 years. when I started in tech startups, everyone was talking about, oh, we're a family, we're doing this. And that was so weird to me because I was like, you're not my family. You're my work people. I have a family. I love them. I have so much fun with them. I have a group of friends that I go out with. You're my work friends.
Family is also dysfunctional. And you know what? A lot of companies are dysfunctional if they say they're like family.
Exactly. It was so weird hearing that, but I didn't say that out loud. It was just my action that when people were going out for drinks and stuff, I was like, oh, no, thank you. Bye. But I went for coffee during the day, and that's how my personality was known and formed in any company that I went. And from one company to another, they knew that I'm very career focused. I have friendships with people at work, and some of my really best friends, you are one of those lovely people.
Same.
I formed a really deep relationship with them because our goals are the same, our personalities are very close. They spoke the same language, and those were the friends that I took and have with me, hopefully for the rest of my life. But most of the other people in a 500 people company, I was very friendly with a lot of people, but I had my borderline
your
work
boundaries.
friends. Yeah. The boundaries of this is work, and when I'm at work, I have specific goals to achieve.
Yeah. So if we go back to the conversation of how you started to chat with folks, you understood like what they got and, you know, where budget comes from, when decisions are made. Can we talk about, besides money, what else can people look for in terms of compensation, and what are some tips there?
Sure. A lot of times people focus a lot on the cash or their salary. I got to a point in my career where I was like, I don't want to change tax bracket.
Yeah. The more you earn, the less it is for you. Yeah.
Exactly. I hit 40% tax bracket and I was like, this is crazy. Why am I been given raises and I'm just paying more taxes? Again, I'm not criticizing taxes. I know taxes are good. I'm happy to pay taxes. It's just that at some point I realized that I shouldn't go after cash. I should go after other things.
And like your life is also so much more, right? Not
Exactly.
everything can be bought. So
exactly.
Look at other things too.
So I know COVID was the time that people started working from home, but I was used to working from home from 2012 because I realized that in a chaotic world of startup, I need days that I'm at home and I actually achieve something.
Yeah. Away from the drama.
Exactly. So I negotiated that with my boss and he was very open and happy about it. And he was like, sure. Every other week I had a day working from home and that became a norm. And it became every week I had one day to work from home to achieve things that I needed. I was responsible for payroll. Payroll needed to be done without interruptions. So payroll days, like processing days, were the day that I was like, I'm going to stay home.
Yeah.
That's something that I could negotiate.
And what I'm hearing there, I think it's important for folks to hear between the lines, is you made it make sense for the business.
Exactly.
You didn't just ask for it. You pointed out how it would also make sense for the business.
Exactly. I was like, when I need to process payroll, I need to be very focused because it's people's money. And a lot of times, and mind you, startup world, you're working in an open area. So like I was exposed to a lot of people. A lot of people would ask questions. They would come to my desk and I had like people's information on my desk and I was always hiding them. I was like, this is not working out. And you're right. I made it make sense. I was like, I need I'm not asking for an office because that was not possible. We had limited space, but I could stay home and get this done. And that was good because I didn't have to commute, and I realized that, okay. And then it made me thinking, what else could I go after? Because I was working from home and because I was working late a lot of times, I asked for my internet to be paid for.
Right.
Again, it made sense. They paid for it. I was on the phone a lot of times at the banks. I had to leave the office to talk privately with investors, with bank, with business prospects. So I asked for my phone to be covered. And the benefit grew. And I loved it. Mm-hmm. And that's how I learned. So any other company that I went to, I took that package with me when I was getting hired. It wasn't always about salary. I was like, I have paid phone, I have paid internet, I have paid parking, I have at least 4 weeks of vacation, I have professional network, I have conference budget, I have book budget, I have networking budget, and my benefit package was more important to me than my salary.
Yeah.
Because when you change focus from money to other benefits, your concentration, it brought me peace because I was not always after money. My phone was taken care of. My internet was taken care of. I had more vacation days without being worried about the money. So the money was good, but I was able to do other things to make my life more interesting.
That's so beautiful the way you described it, that it brought you peace. And if we go into any, negotiation or like salary type of talk, to go in with the attitude of, I want to bring myself peace. How beautiful would that be?
Exactly.
It's not just like, I'm greedy. No, this is about my peace.
It is. Because when I started my career, I was after the money. And it was some of the toughest years of my life because I was so focused on money. I became a director within the first 8 months of my first job in the tech startup. And again, it was because I was working very hard. I was very focused. I was not doing the job to show anyone anything. It was about me. It was about what my dad told me, to be excellent at what I was doing. Mm-hmm. Mind you, the reason I was doing very well was because of my technical background, because I understood the industry and I was able to talk the same language. I was very focused. And the more I got exposed to the numbers in the industry, the more I realized I'm not being paid fairly.
Right. Because I feel like compared to someone else who would be applying to an operations role, they might not have the technical experience and background. And therefore, that's your unique selling point there. And it should be worth more.
Exactly. Because I was able to show my talent and be promoted that fast, I use that as a negotiating point. The opportunity was there. I was up to the challenge. I didn't know what a director means, or just like, okay, I'm going to do this.
And you're willing to learn. That's another thing I hear, because
of
like
course.
You mentioned, part of the full compensation package can cover like learning budget, like going to conferences, books, whatnot. So it sounds like you're someone who will never let that budget slide. Before the end of the year comes, you'll be sure to use it up.
I think that's very important. That's what I also learned throughout my career. If you're so focused on doing the job, get paid, and go back home, growth will be very difficult, especially in the tech world. Everything is changing. Every couple of years, something new comes to the market. When I was entering the market, Ruby was the language that was very popular. I don't hear anyone talking about Ruby anymore.
Uh-huh.
So first of all, you need to know if you're entering this industry, it's people are always learning something new, and you should too. You should be open to educating yourself. I've always enjoyed learning. I've always been a person who has felt that if I'm not learning something new, I'm going to fall behind. And that has been my biggest fear. Money has never been the fear in my life. The job title, the company that I was going to, the people that I was interacting with. But my biggest fear in my career journey has been not knowing or not learning.
Mm-hmm.
I want to learn. I want to educate myself.
And I think for folks who listen to this podcast, some of them might even be considering making a career change. They might not know what yet, but something I've done in the past is I use my professional development budget to dip my toes into something else to try. Mm-hmm. So, for example, right now I do a lot more writing, because it's something that I was curious about, and then I was able to get a bunch of books on like marketing and writing and all the stuff, and develop the skills, and now that can be a bigger part of what I offer. And I can leave behind things that I didn't like as much in past roles. So it gives me that negotiating power for the type of roles I'm suitable for and can go after next.
Absolutely. You need to learn, you need to understand what's happening in the market, and it's not only technical skills, I was working for a company a couple of years ago, and the boss of that company made all the executives to read a book once a month.
Okay. Did everyone have to read the same book, or just any old book?
No, okay. Same book.
It's like a book club.
And it was very weird when I entered the company. But again, because I'm always open, I don't critique or judge people when I enter a new environment. I just want to absorb and understand what's happening when I enter a new role. So I started, and it was difficult because you have a lot of other things that you want to pay attention to. But I made it work. And it helped a lot. It wasn't about technical stuff. It wasn't about leadership skills. It wasn't about, because at that time I was a director. I had a lot of experience. I was known in the industry for what I do, what I'm good at. The board of that industry actually knew me from the first startup. But it was about it was about company culture. It was about the growth, personal growth. It was about communication. So it was actually very interesting, and I learned a lot from it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, if you're entering a new environment, if you're going into a new company and there are strange habits in your eyes, I would say try it.
Yeah, try it. Like the mentor, you said, like the feedback from mentors. You might think it's weird or not, you're not sure, but try it. You won't know until you try it.
Exactly. Try it, and then you learn from it, and it gives you leverage when it comes to negotiating. And the reason I say this is when you enter this is what I share as an example with people who I mentor. When you enter a new company, you are becoming part of this game. It's a game. Look at it as a game. A game has rules. It has sound. It has music. It has movements that you need to know. But there are a lot of hidden rules that you don't know at first. And you have to do it, play the game to know those rules and play with it.
Yeah. And it could be fun. Maybe approach it in a fun way. Yeah.
Yes. There will be difficult stages. There will be easy stages. There will be ultra super hard stages. But if you don't do, you don't learn.
Yeah.
Be open. And then the reason I said it gives you leverage is because when you get to the level of the executives or the people who are key people in making decisions about your salary, about your promotion, about your benefits, about anything that they're responsible for, if you speak the same language, you have an open line of communication with them. And it's not difficult to have that conversation with them. It's not out of the blue. You already have formed a relationship with them, and it gets much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like learning the rules and embedding yourself, integrating, build those relationships. I feel like the themes will just never grow old. All of what we're saying, it really translates well to different scenarios. And if we look at your more recent career transition, you now work in a post-secondary institution. Extremely different rules, I bet. Very different game. How did it have to do with the season of your life and where you're at and what you're looking for? Because you mentioned like early part of the career, it's all about the money. And then you were looking at lots of like professional development opportunities, ways to create peace in your life. So what is it now with your more recent transition? What is the peace you were looking for?
For sure.
Oh, peace. Oh, two ways to spell it. The part piece, but also like the peace and calm piece.
You're right. It has to do with what I've achieved so far in my career. And a lot of times I miss that chaos, but at the same time, I think I've done it enough to know I was able to do it. I achieved a lot. I'm happy with that achievement, but I do this every couple of years. When I'm not sure what I want to do for the next 5 years, I pause. I either change industry or I change position because it takes me out of that chaos, gives me a little bit room to think, to plan, to look better at what's ahead, and then jump again.
Yeah, and because you've positioned yourself so well, like you can always make those jumps again. Like you're confident in yourself. You know you can do it.
That wasn't like this at the beginning. It was very difficult at the beginning of my career, but as I mentioned, the networking, the mentoring, the relationships that I built, the excellence that I made out of the career that I had, or the name that I made for myself in the tech industry, that gives me the confidence that if I want to go back and be that COO or director or VP, that is achievable. I do have recruiters reaching out to me, still asking me if I'm interested in this role and that role. It's just me not wanting to go back right now because what I'm focusing on right now is educating myself again. I'm so concentrated and focused on having enough free time in my day-to-day life to educate myself because the future of work is very different from what I've known so far. And it's not only for me, it's for everyone. So instead of going after that, what I'm used to, I paused. I told myself I need to still be in a technical role, but in an environment where I am not tied to my job the entire week and even the weekend. So I have time for myself to educate myself, to grow my knowledge and understand what do I want to do next. Mm-hmm. So that's why I changed the environment.
Yeah, you're very thoughtful about it. I just want to point that out. It's not unlike someone going on a weekend retreat or whatnot, but for you, it just happens to be a bigger time span. Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm not a weekend retreat person.
Yeah, there you go. This is your version. So what advice would you give to someone, and because this season of the After Work Hangout, we're talking a lot about work and money, what advice would you give for anyone who's planning to make a bit of a change? Like, do you usually save up first, or make sure whatever you're transitioning into next, is continuous? And how do you approach it?
Sure. It really depends on what stage of your career you're at. Very early stages of my career, I didn't have that much saved up because I wasn't making that much. So I had to make plans ahead of time to put one position after another just to make sure I'm financially taken care of. So I always planned. I felt comfortable in the position that I was. So I was not afraid of losing my job, or I built myself as who I was. And then I went after the jobs that I wanted. I applied for it. I planned it very carefully. I timed it. I gave myself a little bit break, and then I moved on. But then when you are a new immigrant, or you have, why I say new immigrant is because a lot of new immigrants have a lot of experience back home. And when they come to Canada, they think that they have to start from scratch again. Yes and no. It really depends on how well you negotiate your background. So keep that in mind if you are a new immigrant. But when I got to a point where I was making enough and I was living comfortably, I always saved up to 6 months to make sure that if I didn't want to stay in a job, I wasn't forced into. At the same time, I built my network. So if I was not feeling comfortable in a position, I would go back to my network and say, hey, I made a wrong move. And I was not afraid of sharing that with my network, with my close network, not everyone. Yeah. Say, I made a wrong move. Is there anything available out there that you think I'm going to be a good fit? That's how I've made my move. Right now, I always have a big chunk saved up because I need to know I can leave at any moment if I don't feel comfortable.
Yeah. Again, building that peace, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the thing I'm going to walk away with. Peace. So back to the new immigrant conversation, I just also want to point out, I do think there's a piece of, there's language skills. Mm-hmm. And what your language skills are for the role that you need to do. Because some roles you might need to communicate a lot, but then some roles maybe they're more technical and like your language skills are not as important. So I think understanding that piece too is something I've noticed when I've worked with newcomers. What do you think?
For sure. I think learning and polishing your communication skills should always be part of your growth. That's my opinion.
Yeah, for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I still go back to take some editing courses or communication classes because I want to add sophistication to my communication level. I've never felt comfortable with English as a second language, meaning I've always pushed myself to go learn more. And you're right, you need to know what is the level of communication that you need for the role that you're going into and get yourself to that level.
But like you said, learn, right? Get curious, learn. You've learned so many different things. Sholeh has done it. You can all do it, whoever's listening. And with this podcast, we also like to acknowledge that life is not just all about work. So I'm curious to hear, how do you recharge outside of work?
Oh, I spend a lot of time in nature. The very early stages of my career, I realized that life is chaotic. Work is tough. It's hard. It's chaotic. But I realized that if I go to the beach and walk by the water, if I go to nature, to forests and walk, hug a tree, I recharge. I do that. I do a lot of meditations. I used to do a lot of yoga, and unfortunately I don't do that anymore, but because I've found a new hobby. I go to intense spin classes these days, and
okay.
Yeah, that really recharges my energy.
You're very goal oriented. I can see why that's fulfilling for you.
Yeah. I do want to mention a couple of things, Crystal. I think it's important you asked it, and I think I didn't answer that properly. You asked about questions and negotiation. I want to make sure I share my experience. Don't be afraid of asking for more, but understand who you're talking to. Practice your ask with someone who can help you polish what you're asking for. And again, the worst thing that could happen is hearing no, and that's okay.
What do you say when, standard, like part of the recruitment process, they ask, what is your salary expectation for this role? I know that legally now it's mandated that job descriptions have a range, but how do you approach this question?
A lot of times I know what the industry standard rate is, and I will try to stay in that range. A lot of times I don't share the number. And you're right, it's been much easier these days because the range is posted and I say I'm comfortable with the range. But before that, I never gave people a number. I was taught to say this: money is not the focus for me right now. The experience and the growth is what I'm interested in. We can always negotiate after. That gave me the leverage to negotiate that when I received the offer.
Mm-hmm.
If I wasn't happy with the number, I would very politely let them know, thank you so much. This is wonderful. I'm just wondering, is this your final number, or are you open to negotiation?
Okay. Is this your final number, or are you open to negotiation? Yeah. And that is what you would say to whoever is presenting the number to you.
Exactly.
And do you say that in writing, or do you say that like in...
Always in writing.
Always in writing. Okay. And yeah, and so, for those who don't have as much industry awareness of what the range is for where you are located and where the type of roles, like the internet is a great tool now. Like,
of course.
You can probably ask AI to pull you some numbers.
Yeah. Or go on PayScale. PayScale is a North American tool, and a lot of times it has the right range of salaries.
Yeah.
It can get very specific to your role, to your city, to your experience, to job descriptions. And yes, Google. Just Google it.
Yeah. So many tools nowadays, honestly. All right. Like, we've covered so much. Landing on this theme of negotiating for what you're worth, do you have anything else you want to share? Whether they're words of encouragement for folks who might not feel like they're worth much right now, or yeah, what are your thoughts?
What I want to say is asking for more money is never an easy conversation. I still get nervous. I still get sweaty hands, but I push myself to go have that conversation because no one else will do that for you but you. So you have to fight for yourself. You're the best person that could do that. So trust your heart. Trust the path that you're on. Don't be afraid to ask questions, but ask the right question. And hearing no is part of this journey, but then you learn how to do it better next time. I think that's what I wanted to share.
Yes, it's a skill, so practice it, and you will get better.
Of course. Practice, practice, practice.
Thank you again, Sholeh. Always lovely to chat with you. I always learn so much, so thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lovely conversation, Crystal.
Thanks for listening to the After Work Hangout. If you enjoy honest conversations about career decisions and life choices, remember to subscribe to the After Work Hangout so you'll know when our next episode drops. And don't forget to leave a 5-star rating while you're at it. You can find a summary of this episode along with more information about our guests and resources that were mentioned at relocal.ca. That's RELOCAL.ca. If you take a look around the website, you'll also find blog posts, downloads, and community offerings to support your career development. I'm your host, Crystal Lee, and I'm always interested in hearing what topics you'd like to learn about. You can connect with me on Instagram at relocal.ca, or you can email me at crystal@relocal.ca. Finally, I want to say a big thank you to all the guests and supporters who make this podcast possible. This includes my podcast manager, Lindsay Curtis, and graphic designer, Alex Dewar, who created the podcast art. Thanks again for listening and sticking around. I hope you're more inspired and ready to make the moves that are right for you. See you at the next Hangout.